Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to participate in this symposium, and I would like to express my most sincere thanks to the National Center for Art Research, to its director, Kataoka-san, and to her team for their invitation and their warm and attentive welcome. I will speak about French National Museums, organization and projects, and the challenges they are facing in our contemporary society. By way of introduction, I would like to highlight 2 points. Firstly, the museum policy in France is part of the national policy driven by the French Ministry of Culture in order to preserve heritage, to support artists and creation, and above all, to ensure that the entire population can have access to the cultural offer. And this question of public, especially young public, is fundamental. Secondly, cultural policy is heavily financed in our country by the state, except of a few fields like cinema and music, which are managed on a more commercial way. But we observe that private funding and partnership have grown in the museums for 30 years, and we will discuss the origins and the consequences of this change. This is a brief overview of national art museums in France. They preserve the national collections resulting from the French Revolution seizures at the end of 18th century, which have been enlarged by acquisitions, donations, and legacies over the past 2 centuries. These collections belong to the state. There are more than 60 national museums in France, and most of them, exactly 43, fall under the responsibility of the Ministry of Culture. There are other ministries responsible for national museums. For example, the Ministry of Defense oversees the Army, Air, and Navy museums. I recommend the newly reopened Navy Museum in Trocadero Place in Paris. And whereas the Ministry of Higher Education oversees the National Museum of Natural History, which houses the most important collections with more than 67 million items. National museums are part of an ecosystem of 1,200 museums labeled as Museums of France, mainly supported by cities. French law gives a strong protection to the heritage and provides that the collections of national museums and museums of France are all inalienable and imprescriptible. They cannot be sold or given in any case. Any exit from the public domain must be decided by law. We have a large panel of collections represented in our national museums, as you can see on this slide. The Louvre Museum is a special case, and I will present it later. Many museums are located in former royal or imperial palaces, like Versailles, Fontainebleau, or Compiègne. Many are dedicated to artists, like Henner, Moreau, Rodin, Picasso museums. And some of them cover a period or special field, like Cluny Museum for Middle Ages or Écouen for the Renaissance period. We have also art and civilization museums like Guillemets Museum for Asian Arts or Quai Branly Museums for ocean and American and African arts. And we have many decorative arts, history, or society museums. This is a very rich and diverse panel, complex also. Here you have illustrations, pictures of this diversity. I have already said that French law strongly protects heritage, especially museum collections. National museums, as well as the 1,200 museums of France, have to respect the Museum Act of 2002, which reminds fundamental principles such as preserving and enlarging collections in order to present them to the public for knowledge and leisure purpose, promoting accessibility to the largest public by education programs and other obligations regarding research, study, publishing on the collections. National museums, at least a part of them, have also to carry out very specific missions when they are responsible for a heritage department. That means that they are regularly asked to provide their expertise on acquisition projects and exportation certificates for works, as well as giving advice to any other museums in their specialty. As you can see on the slide, there are two specific situations. The Louvre Museum, which houses 9 departments for itself, and the Department of the 20th Century for Modern and Contemporary Art, which is shared between 4 museums. This is a specificity. It is not possible to present the French model without mentioning the central part of the Louvre Museum, which is a parent museum, the first of our national museums, designed with a universal purpose and which has enriched for a long time many other national and regional collections with deposits. We estimate there are 50,000 works deposited in museums all over the country. The Louvre is also located for 10 years now in another place on the north of France with Louvre-Lens Museum, and abroad with the Louvre Abu Dhabi through a cooperation, a transfer of expertise, and a trademark license. This institution has also been a pioneer in integrating changes in governance and financial model, which enabled it to improve its attractiveness and its attendance. The turning point took place in the 90s after the opening of Orsay Museum and the Grand Louvre operation. Before this date, the administration managed the financial, administrative, and scientific aspects. And the Réunion des Musées Nationaux, let's call it National Museum Agency, provided mutualized services in all fields of activity, like acquisitions, exhibition production, programming, ticketing, publications, museum shops, and so on. And in the 90s, autonomy was given to some of national museums for their management and their programmation of exhibitions. This change benefited 15 museums, the largest ones, which are now mainly led by an executive president appointed by the ministry on a project and governed by a board which votes the decisions. The Ministry of Culture, I participate in the boards. The president is given a roadmap with targets of audience development, sustainability. Many keep on using the National Museum Agency, but as a service provider, commercial service, mainly for shops and conference visits. They continue to receive a subsidy by the state, but they have to raise money and develop their own resources to implement their project. The other museums remain under the direct supervision of the Ministry of Culture, which financially supports their operations and renovation. They are led by directors, but they don't have the same autonomy as in public establishments. They remain also in the shared model of the National Museum Agency for exhibition, ticketing, publication, and shops. But some of them are able to raise sponsorship for acquisitions or education programs, but on a lower scale. Here you have a short illustration of our organization today. On the left column here, you have the institutions with managerial autonomy, and you can see you have the Louvre, Orsay, Pompidou, Quai Branly, Picasso, Musée Rodin. And on the right side, on the right column, so they are all located, almost all located in Paris, unless the Museum for European and Mediterranean Civilization. And on the other side, you have museums, national museums, managed directly by the ministry. They are located for a small part in Paris area, and for most of them, all around the country. Only Cluny for Middle Age Museum is located in Paris. This is a map that shows the geographical distribution of national museums in France, with this big concentration in Paris, but we are a very centralized country. This policy, this new governance has many positive consequences for the national museums in terms of visibility, attendance, influence. They have been able to undertake major renovation programs, develop their own strategy, improve their self-sustainability, experiment with new projects, develop international cooperation, while remaining involved in regional partnerships. But this development only benefits museums with a certain level of budget and employment, because it requires solid skills in financial matters, human resources, fundraising, patronage, and communication, and this costs a lot. The other national museums are still mostly dependent on the state for their renovation programs, which means that the Ministry of Culture must get the appropriate financial resources. Fortunately, we can support several projects each year. For example, the Middle Ages Cluny Museum at the heart of Paris has been recently reopened, 2022, like the Bois-Préau Castle in the western side of Paris last year also. At the same time, it's important to notice that all these museums, whatever their status, keep on following the guidelines given by the Ministry of Culture, whether it concerns the acquisition rules, the adaptation to digital changes in ecological transition, or the renewal of visitor routes and presentation of the works. I would like to focus on two examples. The first one you know very well, because this is the Centre Pompidou, opened in 1977, not only as a museum, but as an art and culture center, including creation, performance, and a very nice public library. National Museum of Modern Art is one of the leading institutions in its field and with a large international activity, which consists in thousands of loans a year, many exhibitions traveling all around the world in plantations in almost all continents, in Brussels, Malaga, Jersey City, Shanghai, and expertise exported in many countries. This strategy made it possible to develop its influence and also to finance support of its renovation schedules between 25 and 30. The second example, you had an illustration before, is the castle of Fontainebleau, located 60 kilometers south of Paris, almost as large as Versailles, with a rich panel of architectures from the 16th to the 19th century. Its renovation was undertaken once the castle got its autonomy in 2009 and designed a strategic planning for 20 years in order to restore the very large estate and its gardens. At the same time, the castle enlarged its program by hosting an art history festival every year in June, I recommend also, by inviting residents musical ensemble, by exhibiting contemporary art in its gardens, and also developing education projects for young people and families. As mentioned before, museums are completely involved in the national cultural policy and the challenges we have to face. Inclusion policies, education programs are the main priority, with increasing public subsidy for 10 years. National museums are leaders experimenting new tools to make it possible that all people have access to art and culture. The main issue is to renew attendance and attract young people. Pricing policy is a lever, as you can see. The museum have also to face the important questions of our contemporary society, and Gus has just told very brilliantly about it. Concerning the collections, we must strengthen the rules of acquisitions with more research on their origins. We have also to build an ambitious planning of research on the collections housed in our museums, especially on the works purchased during colonization period or which might result from spoliations during the Second World War. Our government is preparing new acts to restitute some items asked by some countries and which might come from illegal appropriations. Many national museums have already implemented research projects to check the provenance of potentially problematic collections. The Quai Branly Museum is the leading institution on this matter and has already set cooperation with African museums for a long time. The museum's director or presidents also want to improve the presentation of the works by recontextualizing the collections and renewing the true roots. This is the big purpose of Orsay Museum now, to anchor the works in political, economic, and social history of the second half of the 19th century. This will also help to improve the management of visitors' flows. As a way of conclusion, I would like to underline a few points. It's obvious that the new governance installed in 15 national museums helped to enhance their identity and ability to support ambitious operations. The field of museums in France remains public, strongly supported by the state and ruled by a law which allows a lot of possibilities. We must always be attentive to keep a balanced situation between a few leading institutions and other museums which need public help to develop. And we must also be attentive to preserve this rich professional and scientific network. We must remind that our institution might be vulnerable, like in the COVID crisis. The government gave in France an extraordinary financial support, the Louvre, Versailles, Orsay, the biggest one. We must remind also that other actors are coming and growing, like private foundations in France, which attract thousands of visitors in their exhibitions. Vuitton Foundation, Pinot Collection, in the heart of Paris. We must keep in mind also this question: how do we want to present art with a high standard of service in the 21st century, in a digitized world, and in accordance with ecological mutations? This is the point the national museums are all focused on. Thank you for your very kind attention. Arigato gozaimasu.